The bonfire had been burning since sundown. Deep inside Haverick's Warfang's victory hall, the great ironwood doors were sealed against the cold, but not fully. Not quite. A thin line of amber firelight bled underneath them, spilling across the stone corridor floor like a wound that hadn't quite closed. And through that same narrow gap, voices carried. Low voices, the kind that men use when they believe no one else is listening. Cythara Silverfangs was 3 steps from that door. She was not supposed to be standing in a cold corridor at this hour. She was supposed to be in her chambers, resting, being the kind of quiet and graceful bonded mate that the Northern Dominion expected her to be. But love, real love, the stubborn, quiet kind, does not always follow schedules. She was carrying a small clay vessel, warm against her palms, and inside it was moon salve she had spent the better part of the evening preparing. Silver root, ground fine, cold moss, soaked in star water, and 1 drop, just 1, of her own healer's essence, pressed from her fingertip and stirred in with careful, deliberate intention. Because her own essence would make the salve work deeper, faster. It would close the gash on Haverick's shoulder, the one he had earned on the morning's border patrol, in half the time. She had done this quietly, no announcement, no request for thanks. She had done it because the night before, standing in the moonlit training yard, he had reached up and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, with a gentleness so unhurried, so unbothered, that she had lost her breath entirely. She had replayed that gesture 17 times between then and now. She had built a small, or private world around it. Love, when it cannot speak freely, moves through small acts. She had learned that from her father. She was 3 steps from the door when his voice reached her. She performs well enough at the ceremonies. Haverick's. His tone was one she had never heard him use with her, flat, stripped of every careful courtesy he extended in her presence. This was the voice of a man among men who required nothing of him. But do not romanticize it, Bracknor. She is a dowry. Her father's 60 sworn warriors, his 3 river territories in the lowlands, the healing power locked in her bloodline. That is what I marked. That is all I marked. The girl herself is irrelevant. Cythara did not move. A second voice rolled through the door. Bracknor Warfang, lazy and amused. She looks at you as though you set the moon in the sky, Haverick's. Almost pitiable. Let her look. The Alpha King's answer came immediately. No pause, no wait. A devoted mate causes less trouble than a suspicious one. Once she heals the territory sickness, and her father's warriors are sworn to the Dominion, I will have what I need. She can tend her moonflowers and feel cherished. Everyone wins. A third voice. Fexor Darkpelt, rough and amused. She seems like the type to actually believe this is real. Haverick's did not respond to that. He did not need to. Outside the door, Cythara stood perfectly still. The clay vessel in her hands felt suddenly, impossibly heavy. The salve she had made, the one with her own essence, stirred in. Because she had wanted him to heal quickly, just because she had wanted him to feel better. Pressed warm against her palms like something she could not explain and could not take back. She looked down at it. She thought about the strand of hair, the 17 replays, the small, careful world she had built from a single unhurried gesture in a moonlit yard. She set the clay vessel down, very quietly, against the cold stone wall. When she straightened, something behind her eyes went entirely still. Not broken, not shattered, not collapsing. Still. The way water goes still before it freezes. Cythara Silverfangs turned and walked back into the dark of the corridor, leaving the salve, and every last illusion she had carried into this kingdom, exactly where she had left them. He wanted a dowry. He was going to learn what a Silverfang could do when she stopped giving things away for free. But the Silverfang lowlands were not beautiful in the way the great packs of the Northern Dominion meant when they used that word. They were not carved from ancient stone. They did not have fortress walls that could be seen from 3 territories away, or war banners wide enough to shadow an entire village square. The Silverfang lowlands were beautiful the way a living thing is beautiful. Warm, breathing, imperfect, and deeply, stubbornly alive. Rivers that ran silver under moonlight, meadows thick with moonflowers in every shade of white and pale gold, blooming year-round in the soft, constant glow that seemed to live in the earth of that valley, like something planted there by the first wolves who ever howled at a sky. Healing gardens that smelled of silver root and cold moss, and something sweeter beneath it all, something that had no name, but that every wolf who entered the lowlands immediately recognized as safety. Arovan Silverfangs had ruled this land for 30 years. He was not a young man anymore. His dark hair had gone silver at the temples, the great scar running from his left shoulder to his elbow, a gift from the border wars of his youth, had long since settled into the kind of mark that looked like it belonged there. He carried his authority the way wolves carry anything they have held long enough, without thinking about it, without performing it, simply with the steady, unshakable weight of something that has become part of the bone. He was also, beneath all of that, a father. And fathers who love their daughters carry a particular kind of grief that no scar and no territory and no title can ever fully quiet. Sithara had her mother's eyes, dark, deep, careful, the kind of eyes that noticed everything and said only a portion of what they observed. She had her father's hands, strong, wide-palmed, built for work, and she had always used them that way, from the time she was 8 years old and learned that her bloodline meant something extraordinary. She had been in the healing gardens before dawn, learning silver root, learning cold moss, learning the ancient lunar-bound texts that Nithra Moonshroud, the Silverfang elder and keeper of pack lore, had preserved for generations in hand-stitched scrolls that smelled of dried herbs and old moonlight. The lunar-bound gift was not a small thing. It was the reason packs from 3 territories away sent messengers to the Silverfang gates when their land began to sicken. But the reason warriors who should have died from battlefield wounds came home whole. A lunar-bound healer could close wounds that would kill ordinary wolves, could lay hands on dying land and feel the ley lines beneath it, those ancient veins of pack power running through the earth, and breathe life back into them with nothing more than focused will and a willing heart. Sithara had done this since she was 16, quietly, without ceremony, because it was what she was for, and because she had never once been given the full language for what that actually meant about her worth. She understood she was valuable. She did not yet understand how to keep that value for herself. The envoy from the Northern Dominion arrived on a grey morning in early autumn, to 6 wolves in the Warfang colours, black and deep silver, rode through the Silverfang gates with the careful posture of men who had been taught to project authority in every territory they entered. Their banner was the Iron Moon, 3 silver crescents crossed over a field of black, the Northern Dominion's mark, the mark of Haveric's Warfang, Alpha King, sovereign of the largest and most militarily powerful pack territory in the known wolf world. Arovan received them in his great hall and dismissed Sithara from the room before the formal reading began. She stood in the corridor outside, her ear not pressed to the door, but her wolf's hearing doing the work without her asking it to. A bond union. Formally requested, Haveric's Warfang seeks the daughter of Eovan Silverfangs as his bonded mate. In exchange, the Northern Dominion will extend full military protection to the Silverfang lowlands for 3 generations, guarantee free passage rights on all Dominion roads and river routes, and formally recognize the Silverfang lowlands as a protected partner territory. She stood in the corridor and breathed. What they didn't say aloud, what they didn't need to, was the rest of it. Her father's 60 sworn warriors, some of the finest fighters in the lowlands, the 3 river territories that controlled the western water routes into the Dominion, and the lunar-bound bloodline, the healing power that the Northern Dominion, with its spreading territory sickness and its faltering pack bonds, desperately, quietly needed. Her father signed. She understood why. She knew his mind the way she knew the silver root's grain, completely, in both directions. He could not give her a royal bloodline. He could not give her the kind of standing the high-born packs of the Dominion respected, but he could give her a crown, and safety, and a future wider than the Silverfang Valley. He could give her a king, and he loved her enough to do it, even though the grief of it lived in every line of his face when she went to him that evening. "You do not have to pretend to be glad," she told him. Eovan Silverfangs looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he pulled her into a hold so fierce it made her breath catch. The kind of hold that a father gives a child when the words are not enough, and have never been enough. "Come back to me," he said into her hair. "Whatever happens in that fortress, Cythara, come back to me." He also called Nithara Moonshroud to his study that night, long after Cythara was in bed. Nithara was ancient. Her face held more lines than a river holds turns, and her silver eyes held more knowledge than she ever willingly shared. She listened to Eovan speak. She said very little in return. Then she took up her quill and her oldest scroll, and she wrote, in the precise, binding language of Silverfang Pack law, a set of clauses into the bond compact that no one from the Northern Dominion bothered to read carefully enough. Eovan was not giving his daughter away without armor. Cythara did not know this yet. She spent that night alone in the moonflower garden she had tended since childhood. The flowers bloomed white and gold around her in the dark, opening toward the quarter moon above, as if they were following its instructions. She sat among them, and she tried to be honest with herself. She had seen Haveric's Warfang once, 3 seasons ago, at a great summit gathering, the kind where alphas from 6 territories converged in formal, watchful peace. She had been there as her father's healer representative, not expected to do more than stand correctly and say nothing memorable. Haveric's had crossed the great hall on the second evening, not looking at anything in particular, moving through the crowd of assembled wolves with the unhurried certainty of a river moving through stone, not forcing its way, just going, because it has always gone. He was tall, silver-eyed, built from something older and colder than ordinary wolves, as though the north itself had decided to take a shape and walk around in it. He had not noticed her. She had not expected him to. She had not been able to forget him. "This is foolish," she told herself now, sitting among the moonflowers. "You are going to a political bond. You are a resource they need. You know this. Go with clear eyes." She breathed in the smell of the garden. She looked at the moon. But perhaps some quieter part of her offered. Perhaps he is also lonely. Perhaps a man like that carries more than he shows. Perhaps you will surprise each other. She was, against every sensible instinct her father had raised her with, already halfway in love with the idea of him. Not him. She knew she did not know him. But the idea, the possibility. She allowed herself that one night of possibility. At dawn she left. The moonflowers were still blooming as she rode out of the valley. She tucked the small clay vessel, her mother's, worn smooth from years of use, into her travelling pack. She had filled it with silver root salve for the road. She would refill it with something else, later, somewhere new. She did not look back at the gate. She was 22 years old, sharp as a knife, and twice as careful, and she was walking into a kingdom with her whole heart open, because she had not yet learned that some doors are designed to let things in, but not out. She would learn. The Iron Moon Keep rose out of the northern landscape, the way a mountain rises, not built so much as simply always having been there, predating the concept of construction. It was ancient in the way that carries weight. Black stone walls that had watched centuries of wolf-kind politics play out beneath them. Great iron gates engraved with the 3-crescent mark of the Warfang line. A courtyard wide enough to run war exercises, and a great hall large enough to host every alpha in the known territories with room to spare. And cold. The air here had an edge that the Silverfang lowlands, with their warm valley breath, had never prepared her for. Sithara arrived in the late afternoon, when the northern sky had gone, the deep, bruised violet of approaching evening. The Warfang warriors who had escorted her through the territory rode in flanking formation, silent and correct. The gates opened without fanfare. The pack watched from the walls, from the courtyard, from windows in the upper towers, some with curiosity, some with the politely veiled dismissal of wolves who have already decided that a lowland girl in nice clothes is still, ultimately, a lowland girl. She held her chin level and met every gaze she could find. You may decide what I am, she thought, not looking away. I will not help you do it. Haverix received her in the great hall. He was standing, not seated, not positioned on the great carved alpha's chair that dominated the far wall, but standing near the central fire, one hand resting loosely on the back of a chair, as if he had no need to perform the trappings of authority to make a room understand he held it. He was exactly as she remembered, and nothing like what she had prepared for. The silver eyes found her the moment she crossed the threshold, not searching, just landing, the way a bird of prey lands without effort or urgency. He was in training leathers rather than formal dress, which told her either that this reception was calculated informality, or that he simply did not believe he needed to dress up for her arrival. She filed both possibilities, and kept walking. He extended his hand, palm up, the Warfang greeting, formal, but not cold. Sithara Silverfangs. His voice was low and even, carrying the kind of weight that comes from decades of being obeyed. You are welcome to the Northern Dominion, Alpha King. She placed her hand in his, with a formal greeting returned. I am grateful for the welcome. Their eyes held for a moment longer than strictly required. She was looking for something in his face, some flicker of anything that might answer the question she did not know how to ask. She found him watching her with an expression she could not yet read. Careful, assessing, not unkind. She told herself that was enough. For now. In the weeks of formal courtship before the bond ceremony, she learned the shape of him. He was not expressive, but he was present. There was a difference, and she paid attention to it. He did not offer compliments easily or reach for softness as a tool, but he appeared beside her in the mornings on the training grounds without being asked. He rode with her along the ridge paths when she requested to survey the Northern Territory's land health, and he did not talk over her observations. When she mentioned, only once and in passing, that silver root was difficult to source this far north, she came back to her chambers 3 days later to find a fresh bundle of it on her work table, wrapped in oilcloth, with no note. She held it for a long time before she put it away. Her handmaiden Ivriah, who had made the journey from the Silverfang lowlands with her, watched all of this from the correct distance. Ivriah was bright and loyal and deeply, practically suspicious of everyone. She watched Haverix the way a dog watches a fire, respecting the warmth, aware of the burn. "He is kind to you, my lady," she said one morning, helping Sithara prepare for the day. "But I want you to notice the difference between what a man gives freely and what a man gives because it costs him nothing. What do you see that concerns you?" Ivriah was quiet for a moment, braiding Sithara's dark hair with practiced fingers. "I see a man who is careful with you. I do not yet see a man who is undone by you. Those are different things." Sithara thought about that. She did not answer. She was not ready to agree, because she was still watching, and because 3 days later, everything Ivriah had said became harder to hold on to. It was evening in the moonlit training yard, late enough that most of the pack had gone inside. Haverix was reviewing formations with 2 of his senior lieutenants, and Sithara had come out to look at the stars, which sat lower and brighter here than in the valley and had not stopped fascinating her. She was sitting on the stone wall at the yard's edge when he finished his review, dismissed the lieutenants, and walked over to her. He did not say anything at first. He stood beside her and looked at the same sky she was looking at. Then he lifted one hand and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, the one the wind had freed, with a gentleness so unhurried, so absent of performance, that her chest went tight. His silver eyes met hers, just for a breath. Then he was looking at the sky again, easy and unhurried, as though the world had not just shifted. She replayed that gesture 17 times in the hours that followed. She told herself it was real. She told herself he was a man who showed things slowly, deeply, without announcement, the way the best healers work, without drama, without display. She built an entire future out of that single tender moment. The bond ceremony came at the full moon, 3 weeks after her arrival. It was held in the open air of the great summit plateau behind Iron Moon Keep, a sweep of dark stone under a sky flooded with silver light. The entire pack gathered in the ceremonial circle, and the ancient words were spoken by the pack elder, Isnor Moonfang, in the old tongue that Sithara had studied from her father's books and could follow well enough to understand. The moonfire burned between them, pale, almost white, the sacred bonding flame that could only be called by an alpha pair in willing union. Haverix's silver eyes held hers through the entire ceremony, and she thought she saw something in his face. Just once, or a flicker of something unguarded, something that lived below strategy and below calculation, and below the iron discipline of a man who had been Alpha King since he was 27 years old. She wanted to name it hope. She chose to name it possibility. When he placed the pack mark on her wrist, the 3 crescents pressed into her skin in the bond seal, his thumb rested over it for 3 full seconds longer than the ceremony required. She noticed. She remembered. The morning after the ceremony, he was already gone when she woke. A folded note on the pillow beside her, formal, courteous, informing her of his schedule and the morning's council duties, written in his clean, controlled hand, signed with his full name. She read it twice. She folded it and tucked it away in the small pocket of her travelling pack, and beside her mother's clay vessel. He is busy, she told herself. He is a king. Kings carry more hours in a day than anyone can see. She would be patient. She would tend the gardens and learn the pack and make herself useful and let him find his way toward her in the time that he needed. She was almost certain, seen something real. She would wait for it. She was so convinced it was worth waiting for. 1 month into the bond, Haverix's warriors drove back a rival pack's encroachment on the northern border. It was not a small thing. 3 days of hard fighting, 24 injured wolves, and a territorial line successfully held against a pack that had been testing it for years. The victory celebration that filled the great hall that evening was the kind of noise that a fortress makes when it exhales. Deep, rich, expansive. The warmth of people who have survived something pressing outward through stone walls and ironwood doors. Sithara had not gone to the feast immediately. She had spent the afternoon in her healing chamber, because 6 of the injured wolves had come through her door before dinner, and she had worked steadily, quietly, patiently through all of them, closing the cuts that were still open, drawing fever from a shoulder infection that had started to set in, sitting with a young warrior named Cleavor Stormshard, barely 18, too proud to cry, too young to have learned not to, until the trembling in his hands went still. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. When the last warrior left her chamber, the hall below was in full celebration, and her work table was covered in used linen and empty preparation bowls. She cleaned up slowly, methodically, the way she always did. And then her eye fell on the clay vessel, and she thought of Haverix's shoulder. He had taken a gash, deep, probably 6 inches along the muscle, during the first day's fighting. She had heard it from Bracknor's second-in-command when she had asked. It had been treated by the pack physician with standard care, which meant it was sealed but not properly healed. Standard care left residual inflammation. Standard care meant he would feel that shoulder for weeks. Her salve could close it in a night. She had thought about offering earlier and had held back. She had been finding the line between being a mate and being an unasked-for presence, and she had not wanted to push. But it was late now, and the celebrations were winding down, and she had time, and she had the ingredients, and she found that she wanted to do this. Not because it was politically useful, not because a good mate would, because she wanted him to be comfortable, and the difference between those reasons felt important. She ground the silver root by candlelight. She soaked the cold moss in the star water she kept filtered by the window, and then she took the small clay vessel and pressed 1 drop of her own essence into the blend. Slow and deliberate. It was a gift specific to her bloodline. That drop. It could not be bought or requested. It could only be given freely. She gave it freely. She filled the vessel and warmed it in her palms and walked down the corridor toward the great hall. She had replayed the gesture in the training yard 17 times. She was about to do something that felt equally true. That felt like an extension of the same thing. She was 3 steps from the ironwood door when she heard his voice. She had been through the exact geography of that moment enough times in the weeks that followed to know every detail with perfect, terrible precision. The amber light under the door, the deep cold of the stone corridor, the warmth of the vessel in her hands. She performs well enough at the ceremonies. Flat, unbothered. The voice of a man who believes himself completely alone. But do not romanticize it, Bracknor. She is a dowry. Her father's 60 sworn warriors, his 3 river territories, the healing power in her bloodline. That is what I marked. That is all I marked. The girl herself is irrelevant. Bracknor's easy chuckle. She looks at you like you set the moon in the sky, Haverix. Let her look. Immediate to effortless. A devoted mate causes less trouble than a suspicious one. Once she heals the territory sickness and her father's warriors are sworn to the Dominion, I will have what I need. She can tend her moonflowers and feel cherished. Everyone wins. Then Fexa Darkpelt's rough voice amused and thoughtless the way young men are when they believe no woman is within range of anything they say. She seems like the type to actually believe this is real. Haverix did not respond. He did not need to defend her. He did not feel the need, because there was nothing to defend. She was a calculation he had made correctly, a resource he had acquired efficiently. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what he had predicted she would do, and everyone in that room knew it. Outside the door, Cithara Silverfangs did not make a sound. The pain was too specific for sound. It moved through her the way cold water moves, not slamming, not crashing, just settling, into every hollow, every space, filling every place she had left, open on purpose, because she had believed, with the stubbornness of a woman who had never been lied to by the person she loved, that she was filling those spaces with something real. The strand of hair. 17 replays. The silver root he had brought her, wrapped in oilcloth, with no note. The way his thumb had rested on her wrist 3 seconds longer than required. She's generous with her gifts because she believes she is loved, he had said. That generosity is exactly what I need. Do not disturb it. She saw it now, all of it, reassembled in its true shape, every small, careful gesture. Not love, not even its cousin. Management, a maintenance of a resource he needed to remain willing. Every moment of warmth had been calibrated to keep her exactly where she was, open, devoted, grateful, giving. Like a garden he had watered just enough to keep it producing. Her hands were cold around the clay vessel. She looked down at it. The salve inside was still warm. Her own essence, freely given, pressed in because she had wanted him to heal quickly. Because she had wanted him to feel better. Because she had loved him, or had loved what she thought he was, with the full and unguarded entirety of a woman who had never learned to love in portions. She set the vessel down, against the cold stone wall, very quietly, without a sound. She straightened. She walked back into the dark. By the time she reached her chambers, the tears had come, silent and hot, the kind that do not ask permission and cannot be stopped once they begin. She did not try to stop them. She sat at the edge of the bed and let them run their full course, because she had been raised in a home that taught her never to swallow a grief that needed to move through you. You let it move, you let it finish, and then you breathe. She breathed. She thought of her father. Arovan Silverfangs had built a life from the lowlands, not because the world gave him an easy path, but because he understood, with absolute clarity, the value of what he held and refused to let others determine it for him. He had also never made a bad investment twice. Cithara sat in the dark of her chambers for a long time, her hand still faintly warm from the vessel she had set against the stone wall. And when the tears finished, really finished, all the way to the bottom, she felt something else take their place. Not rage. Rage is hot and uncontrolled, and useful only for burning things. This was colder, cleaner, more like a decision. She had walked into this kingdom with everything open. Her heart, her gifts, her healing, her hours, her drop of essence stirred into warm solve by candlelight, given freely, because she had believed she was loved. She had believed she was seen. She was not seen. She was useful. There was a difference she understood completely now, and she would not forget it. He wanted a healer's gifts and a warrior's dowry. He had assumed she would go on giving both, willingly and without condition, because devotion had blinded her. She was done being blind. She rose from the bed, smoothed her dress, and crossed to the small writing desk beneath the window. She took out a fresh piece of parchment and set the quill in the inkwell. She did not write anything yet. She just sat for a moment in the quiet of the room, listening to the distant sounds of the celebration still winding down in the hall below. Then, carefully and with full intention, she began to think. Not about grief, about leverage. She did not come to breakfast with swollen eyes. She came in her formal silver fang healer silks, the deep midnight blue with the silver crescent at the collar that marked her bloodline's full status. No softening additions, or no concession to the Dominion's preference for its alpha mates in warm tones and deferential presentation. The silks were austere and precise, and said, to anyone who understood the language of Silverfang formal dress, that the woman wearing them was not here for your approval. She sat at the morning council table. She did not pour Haverix's tea. She had done it every morning for 32 days, quietly, naturally, as part of the gentle rhythms she had established in her first weeks, small acts of care woven into the morning routine, taken for granted by the third week because devoted mates do not announce their devotion. They simply sustain it. Today, the tea sat in its pot, untouched, until a lieutenant reached over and poured his own. Haverix's silver eyes found her across the table. He said nothing. He watched. She addressed the War Council directly. I would like a formal reading of the Bond Compact's healer rights provisions before we begin the morning session. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when someone has said something no one expected. Bracknor Warfang set down his cup. Fexer Darkpelt looked at his hands. Two of the senior lieutenants exchanged a glance so brief it might have been imagined. Haverix's jaw was still, but his silver eyes had sharpened in a way she recognized, the way he looked when a border situation had just changed shape, without warning. The compact was fetched. Isnor Moonfang, the pack elder, read the provisions aloud. He was a careful man, Isnor, thorough, unhurried, committed to accuracy. He read every clause. And when he reached the one Nithra Moonshroud had inscribed in Silverfang pack law, or he paused for precisely half a breath. No healer of the lunar-bound line may be compelled, coerced, or expected by custom or bond obligation to activate healing, territory restoration, or any gift of the bloodline without their willing, freely given consent, offered under an unbroken moon, and formally acknowledged by the receiving party under signed pack record. Isnor looked up. He folded the compact with both hands. The silence in the room was extraordinary. Haverix Warfang had never, not once in his 18 years as Alpha King, been blind-sided in a council meeting. She watched him understand, in real time, that he had been operating for 33 days on an assumption that was not supported by any law he could enforce. He had believed that the bond ceremony sealed the exchange. 60 warriors, 3 river territories, and 1 devoted lunar-bound healer, all delivered, all producing. He had believed that devotion was a mechanism he had successfully engaged. The devotion was gone, and without it, the mechanism had no teeth. He looked at her. She met his gaze with the same flat, quiet calm she had spent a sleepless night assembling. The healer rights clause is binding, she said simply. I would like it formalized and recognized by this council in writing before the next healing request is processed. You are my bonded mate, Haverix said. His voice was level, controlled, not a contract partner presenting terms. A bonded mate's gifts are her own, my king. That is not my opinion. That is pack law. Nithra Moonshroud inscribed it. Isnor Moonfang just read it. She held his gaze. I am not renegotiating the bond. But I am simply reading what was already written. Bracknor opened his mouth. Haverix silenced him with one hand, flat on the table. The council went on. The tea in the pot went cold. Afterward, she spent 2 hours with the pack physician, Navarix Bloodshard, who was a quiet and methodical wolf she had come to respect. She explained, patiently and clearly, what the new healer rites process would look like. All treatment requests from Dominion warriors would go through a formal healer record log. Her consent would be noted, in writing, for each session. The pack would acknowledge her role, in record, as the source of the treatment, not as a benefit of the bond union, but as a service of the lunar-bound healer. She was not angry at Navorix. He had never been anything but professional with her. She was precise with him, not cold. But this is not a refusal to heal, she told him clearly. I will not leave a wolf to suffer unnecessarily, but my gifts are mine. I am simply ensuring that the record reflects that. Navorix nodded, slowly. I understand, Lady Silverfangs. Sovereign healer Silverfangs, she said, gently, without heat. If you please. He wrote it down. Haverix came to her healing chamber that evening. She was at her work table when he entered, not storming, not slamming, because he was a king, and kings move as if every space belongs to them, which is both a power and a blindness. He crossed the room and stood at the table's edge, and he was very, very controlled and very, very furious. What are you doing, Sithara? Not a question. A demand dressed in a question's shape. She did not stop what she was doing. She was grinding silver root, which required a particular rhythm that benefited from not being interrupted. Exactly what I said this morning, following the law that governs my bloodline. You have been healing Dominion warriors for 30 days without issue. You chose today to make this political. She looked up. Her dark eyes were entirely steady, which was, she noted from the slight shift in his posture, somewhat unsettling to him. I chose today because I understand today what I didn't understand 30 days ago, that I was healing this pack out of love, and love that is taken for granted becomes something else. Something crossed his face, quickly, gone before she could name it. You said I was irrelevant, Haverix. Her voice was calm, not cold, clear. The distinction mattered. I am simply agreeing with you. My gifts, however, are not. You know that now. I believe you have always known that. The difference is that now, so do I. She looked back down at the silver root. He stood at the edge of her work table for a long moment. Then he left, and the door closed behind him, and she allowed herself exactly 15 seconds of closed eyes and careful breathing before she went back to the grinding. Her wolf, the instinct she had been trained since childhood to listen to as a healer, told her he had not expected that, had not expected her steadiness, had not expected to look at the woman he had marked and see, looking back at him, a stranger. Good. A stranger was harder to manage than a devoted mate. It was 2 weeks after this that Sithara attended an Interpack territorial gathering at a summit hall 2 hours east of Iron Moon Keep, accompanying Haverix as his bonded mate in the formal procession. She sat beside him during the formal sessions, and beside Ivraya during the evening reception, which was her preference, and which Haverix had stopped raising objections to. In the 3rd hour of the reception, a wolf crossed the room toward her with the particular directness of someone who knows exactly where they are going. He was tall, not Haverix's height, but close. Dark-haired, golden-eyed, wearing the storm-blue colors of the eastern reaches with the easy confidence of someone who had earned his territory and knew it. He bowed, not a formal pack bow, but a genuine inclination of the head. Sovereign healer Silverfangs, he said. And then he smiled, open and unhurried. I have been hoping to speak with you. I am Orendor Nightfangs, Alpha of the Eastern Reaches. I have heard extraordinary things about the lunar-bound line, and I find I am much more interested in learning them from the source than from second-hand reports. She looked at him, He met her gaze steadily, without calculation, without the assessing quality she had learned to recognize in the eyes of wolves who were measuring her value before deciding whether she was worth addressing. He was treating her as the most interesting person in the room. That had not happened in 30 days. "Alpha Nightfangs," she said, and returned his smile. "I have time." Across the reception hall, Haverick's Warfang looked up from his conversation and saw them talking. He watched for a moment. Then he looked away. He told himself it was of no consequence. He was wrong. The summit season brought 3 great territorial gatherings before the Grand Summit, and Orindor Nightfangs was at every one. He rode beside Sithara in the morning patrols when the assembled alphas took the courtesy exercise of surveying the hosting territory's boundaries. He sat across from her at the formal reading sessions, and, unlike the majority of attending wolves who treated the readings as an opportunity to conduct sidebar negotiations, he actually listened, and when the sessions ended, he had specific and thoughtful things to say about what had been read. He laughed openly and easily, a genuine sound without politics in it, and she found herself laughing back in a way she had entirely stopped doing inside Iron Moon Keep. He asked her about the lunar-bound line, without the transactional edge that the question always carried when anyone inside the Dominion raised it. He asked about the work, what it felt like to read a ley line's health, whether land had something like a pulse, how the ancient keepers had first documented the healer bond centuries ago. He was fascinated for its own sake, not for what it could be turned into. She answered freely, because there was no reason not to, and in answering, she found herself thinking more carefully about the work than she had been encouraged to think about it in weeks. Havericks noticed. She was aware of exactly when he began to notice, because his behavior changed in specific, readable ways. He took the morning patrol position closest to her when the group rode out. Not speaking to her, just there, the way a wolf puts its body between a threat and something it considers its own. He found reasons, in the formal reading sessions, to redirect conversations that required her participation in a way that placed him physically at her left, his dominant side. He stopped leaving the evening receptions when he had conducted his minimum required diplomacy, and instead stayed in the room. He was watching Orindor. He was also watching her, which was new. Before, his attention had been a managed thing, present when it was useful, absent when other demands required it. Now it had a quality she did not entirely know what to do with. Focused, unsettled, a man who is looking at something he cannot calculate. His wolf was not philosophical about Orindor Nightfangs. His wolf, she suspected, had stopped being philosophical about much of anything. One evening, in the corridor outside the third summit reception, he caught up to her as she was leaving. "No, the Eastern Alpha finds you remarkably fascinating," he said. His voice was perfectly controlled. His jaw was tight. She looked at him. "He treats me as though my thoughts have value. It is a novel experience." She walked past him. She heard, behind her, a slow, exhaled breath. She did not turn around. What Havericks couldn't see, what she had been building for 2 full months in careful, methodical silence, was not a courtship with Orindor Nightfangs. It was a legal framework. She had spent her evenings with the keepers of the ley. The keepers were not members of any pack. They existed outside of pack politics, the way rivers exist outside of property boundaries, present, essential, and belonging only to themselves. They were the oldest institutional memory of wolfkind, and they guarded the documentation of the ley lines running beneath every major territory in the known world with a rigor that made Nithra Moonshroud's archive look casual. Sithara had written to them in her 3rd week in the Dominion, or when she had first placed her hands on the northern land during a survey walk, and felt something that had concerned her deeply. The land was not dying, but it was thin. the way a fire goes thin when the air it needs begins to run short. The keepers sent their chief scholar, an ancient wolf named Lornix Moonshroud, the only one of their number who ever left the archive, to meet her at the second summit gathering. They spoke for 4 hours in the library of the hosting fortress. The door closed, the conversation conducted in the formal register of lay law that neither Haverix nor any of his lieutenants would have been able to follow, even if they had pressed their ears to the door. What Lornix told her was this: the ley line running beneath Iron Moon Keep, the deep, ancient vein of pack energy that fed the Northern Dominion's territory, sustained its land's health, and gave its capital its foundational strength, had been deteriorating for 3 generations. The previous Alpha Kings had managed it with temporary measures, none of which addressed the root cause. The root cause was simple, irreversible, and had been documented in the Keeper archives for 200 years. This particular ley line required permanent anchoring by a lunar-bound healer. Without that anchor, the deterioration was inevitable. Gradual, but inevitable. The territory sickness was not a border problem. It was not a rival pack's working. It was the land itself, running slowly out of what it needed. Only she could give it what it needed, and she hadn't done so. She had not placed her healing bond on that ley line in the 60 days since her arrival. She had felt it pulling at her, faintly. Like a tide she was not following, and she had held back, not out of strategy but out of instinct, because her instincts had said that this was not the moment, and her instincts, she was discovering, had been wiser than her heart. She stayed quiet about the ley line. She asked Lornix to draft, instead, the anchor clause, a provision to be inscribed into sovereign pack law, stating, with the Keeper archives' full authority, that the ley bond belongs to the healer who creates it, not to the crown of the territory it sustains. The bond is personal, not political. It cannot be claimed, seized, or transferred. If the healer withdraws, the anchor withdraws with her. Lornix looked at her over the stacked scrolls with ancient golden eyes. He said very quietly, "You understand what this means." "I do. Once inscribed, or no Alpha King can override it." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "Your father chose well." She was quiet for a moment, too. "He chose carefully, which he would tell you is the same thing." Lornix began to write. The multi-pack accord she was building with Orindor moved in parallel, slower, more visible, occupying Haverix's attention as something he could watch and fume about and miscalculate as a romantic complication. Orindor was a willing and capable partner. He had his own reasons for wanting the lunar-bound line to hold protected sovereign status across the Dominion. He had 2 lunar-bound healers in the eastern reaches whose work had been subject to Dominion claims during previous border negotiations, and the accord would protect them as well. "This is the cleanest piece of political architecture I have seen in a decade," he told her one afternoon, reviewing the latest draft in the library of the 3rd Summit Fortress. "Your father's people trained you well." "My father's people trained me to understand the value of what I carry," she said. "I am applying the lesson somewhat later than I should have." Orindor looked at her with those open golden eyes. "For what it's worth, I see what he failed to. That is not strategy, Sothara. That is simply the truth." She appreciated that he did not dress it up. What she did not tell Orindor, what she did not tell anyone, was that Haverix had started appearing in her healing garden in the mornings. Not every morning, not with announcement. Just sometimes, before the council sessions, he would be there, standing at the garden's edge in the early light, not asking anything, not performing anything, just there in the way that a man stands when he does not entirely know why he has gone somewhere, but cannot make himself leave. He asked about the silver root one morning. A genuine question, not transactional, just curious. The way people are curious about things they have been near for a long time without ever seeing. She answered him. He nodded and was quiet. He came back the next morning. She did not soften, but she filed it away in a private place she did not examine closely, because there were things in there she was not ready to look at directly. One late evening in the library, Sithara reviewing Keeper scrolls by lamplight, Haverix seated across from her with his own reading, a situation that had developed over several weeks without being officially established. He looked up from the table and said, very quietly, "You used to bring me things. Small things. You stopped." She did not look up from her scroll. "You told Bracknor the girl was irrelevant." I simply agreed. The silence that followed lasted a long time. She read 3 full paragraphs of ley law documentation. She did not retain a single word of them. When she looked up, he was still watching her. His silver eyes held something she could not name, which meant it was something she had not seen on him before. She looked back down. That night, in her chambers, she took the clay vessel from the shelf where she had placed it when she arrived. She held it in her palms for a moment, the way she had held it the night she had set it down in the corridor. But it was empty now. She had not refilled it. She set it back on the shelf. She went to bed. She did not sleep easily. The Grand Alpha Summit convened at the season's full moon. It was held in the great hall of the neutral grounds, the ancient site at the center of 4 major territories that no pack claimed and all packs acknowledged, with walls of stone older than any existing Alpha line and a roof open to the sky at its center, designed so that every wolf assembled beneath it stood under the same moon. The ceremonial logic was straightforward. Under the open sky, no Alpha has a home advantage. Every Alpha and Elder from the known pack world attended. The Haverix entered with Sithara on his left, the formal position of a bonded mate, and the assembled packs watched with the particular attention reserved for situations where something interesting is expected to happen. Word had traveled, the way pack world word always travels, in fragments and with embellishment, that the Dominion's healer mate had gone cold, that the Alpha King had lost his easy control of the resources he had marked, that something had shifted inside Iron Moon Keep in ways that could not be fully explained from the outside. Sithara wore midnight blue. The Silverfang silver crescent at her collar caught the moonlight and held it. She sat beside Haverix through the first session. Formal proceedings, territorial record updates, the standard business that occupied the morning half of any grand summit. Though she was present and appropriate and contributed when addressed, and showed nothing on her face that could be read as anything other than composed attention. In the afternoon recess, she met briefly with Orindor, who was across the hall with his Eastern Reaches delegation. They did not speak for long. He handed her a folded document. She read it, folded it again, and tucked it into the interior pocket of her formal robe. He returned to his delegation. She returned to her seat. The afternoon session opened. The agenda listed, as the 4th item, a matter of sovereign healer recognition, submitted by the Eastern Reaches delegation, co-signed by 7 elder packs, and documented under the Keeper Archive's formal authority. Haverix, seated beside her, looked at the agenda item, his jaw tightened by the smallest fraction, or she felt his stillness. She said nothing. When the summit facilitator reached item 4, Sithara rose. She had spoken in formal council before, in her father's hall, at smaller pack gatherings, in the training sessions Nithra Moonshroud had run for years. She knew the particular quality of silence that falls over an assembled group when the person speaking is saying something that reorganizes the room. She had been on the listening side of that silence before. Now she was on the other side. I address this summit as sovereign healer of the lunar-bound Silverfang line, she said, recognized under the Keeper Archive's formal documentation and the Multipack Accord ratified by 7 elder territories, co-sponsored by the Eastern Reaches. She let that settle for exactly 3 seconds. For the Northern Dominion is experiencing territory sickness. This is known. What is not fully known, outside of the Keeper Archive's records and this hall, is the nature of its source. She explained the ley line, clearly, without technical language unnecessary to the audience. She explained what a lunar-bound anchor meant, what its absence meant, and what the Keeper Archive's records showed about the Dominion's foundational ley line's current state. She explained the anchor clause, inscribed in Keeper law, which established that the ley bond belongs to its healer and cannot be claimed by any crown. She explained that she had not yet placed that anchor. The room was very, very quiet. The Northern Dominion's continued territorial strength depends on a willing gift from a lunar-bound healer. That gift cannot be forced, demanded, purchased, or assumed under any existing pack law. The Sovereign Healer Accord this summit is now ratifying establishes, across all signatory territories, that no Alpha may claim, control, or coerce a lunar-bound healer's gifts by virtue of bond, treaty, or custom. She looked at Haverix. He was looking at her. His silver eyes held something she hadn't seen on him in any of the 33 days she had spent trying to read his face. It was not anger. It was not calculation. It was the specific, devastating recognition of a man who has understood, all at once, all the way to the bottom, the shape of what he lost, and exactly when he lost it. She held his gaze for one clean breath. Then she turned back to the assembled summit. I offer this not as a threat. The Northern Dominion's land will not be allowed to fail, and the wolves who live in it have done nothing to deserve that consequence, but they deserve a sovereign who understands the value of what sustains them, and a healer who understands the value of what she gives. She sat. The facilitator called for ratification. The 7 co-signing elder packs confirmed in order. The accord passed. Into the silence that followed, Sithara turned to Haverix. She leaned not toward him, but enough that her voice reached him alone. Private in the middle of 300 assembled wolves. I am just a dowry, my king, she said quietly, and a dowry is an investment. I am simply ensuring I hold the controlling interest. His own words, the ones he had spoken to Bracknor in the firelit hall, believing no one else could hear, or the ones he had said with no weight in them because she was irrelevant and devotion is simple to manage. His face did not hold its composure. Not fully. Not in front of everyone assembled. For one visible, undeniable moment, Haverix Warfang, Alpha King of the Northern Dominion, the most feared wolf in the known world, looked like a man who has just discovered the full cost of something he was very certain he had paid nothing for. Orindor Nightfangs rose next. He addressed the summit briefly, clearly, with the directness she had come to appreciate. He formally clarified for the record that his relationship with Sovereign Healer Silverfangs had been, from the first moment to the last, a strategic alliance toward the ratification of the accord they had just passed. I was not courting the Alpha King's mate, he said, and there was something like open admiration in his voice. I was watching her acquire the terms to protect her own people. I was honored to assist. He sat. The hall exhaled. Sithara gathered her folios, unhurried and exact. She rose. She looked, once, across the hall to where her father sat in the elder section, a Rovan Silverfangs, silver-templed, scarred, 60 warriors at his word, and 3 river territories at his back, watching his daughter with the expression of a man who has just seen the person he loves do something so wholly, completely themselves, that the pride of it has nowhere left to go. She held his gaze for a breath. Then she looked forward and walked toward the great hall's door. She heard behind her the sound of Havericks rising. He crossed the hall quickly. He caught her in the wide stone corridor beyond the doors, out of the direct line of the assembled summit, but not far enough to be invisible to anyone who looked. He stood in front of her. He was not performing anything. He was not managing anything. He was a king who had misplaced every tool of kingship somewhere in the last 100 days, and had arrived, finally, at the raw and uncomfortable place where there is nothing left but honesty. "What does this mean for us?" he said, not demanding, asking. She looked at him, and for a moment, just half a breath, something in her chest moved. The old warmth, not dead, just buried deep under 60 days of careful, necessary distance. It moved like something that had been very still for a long time, shifting when it hears a sound it recognizes. She closed it again. "You designed this marriage as a transaction, Havericks. As a businesswoman, I must tell you, I do not renegotiate closed contracts." She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she walked away. She did not look back. She could feel between her shoulder blades the weight of his eyes following her all the way down the corridor. The weight of a man who has finally, completely, and much too late, begun to see. She returned to Ironmoon Keep. That surprised some of the packs who had watched the summit. They had assumed, the way assembled wolves always assume when a dramatic recalibration has taken place, that she would leave for the Silverfang lowlands, return to her father's valley, withdraw entirely. She did not. She returned because the land needed her, and because her own healing work did not make exceptions for personal complications, and because, though she did not say this to anyone, not even Ivraya, running would have given the story an ending it had not yet earned. As everything inside the keep was different, not in the grand, dramatic ways that stories sometimes pretend, not overnight and not completely, but different in the way that a room is different when the light has shifted. The same objects, the same walls, but the quality of attention on them changed. The pack moved differently around her. Before, she had been the Alpha King's lowland mate, tolerated, watched, assessed. Now she was the sovereign healer of the Lunarbound line, recognized by Summit Accord and Keeper Law, and holding in her living hands the continued health of every warrior's land they lived and trained and bled on. The warriors who came to her healing chamber came differently, not with the breezy entitlement of men who believe they are accessing a service their alpha paid for, with the particular, a genuine respect of people who understand that what they are receiving is being given by choice. She noticed the difference. She preferred it. Navarick's blood shard, the pack physician, worked with her more openly than before, asking her questions about lay health indicators, sharing his own observations about the territory sickness's progression, treating her as the authority she was, rather than the accessory he had been told to accommodate. She found she genuinely liked him. She incorporated his notes into her keeper correspondence, with his full name credited. Ivraya, helping her dress one morning with the particular brisk efficiency that characterized every task Ivraya had ever performed in her life, said without preamble, "He brought moonflowers." Sithara paused. "What? Outside your door, before dawn this morning. A clay pot with one moonflower in it. No note. I almost tripped over it." She was quiet for a moment. Ivraya continued braiding her hair, silent, waiting. "Did you bring it inside?" "I set it on the windowsill," Ivraya said, "where it could get light." A pause. "My lady, the king looks at you the way you used to look at him." Sithara stood at the window for a moment, looking at the small clay pot and the pale moonflower opening toward the morning. Its petals were the exact shade of the flowers she had left behind in the Silverfang Valley. She did not know where he had sourced it this far north. "I know," she said finally. And that is the cruelest part." Ivraya said nothing. She finished the braid and pinned it, and laid Sithara's formal silks over the chair, and left the room without another word. Which was, Sithara recognized, but one of the many reasons she had always depended on Ivraya for more than just dress fastenings. Haverix did not make dramatic gestures. That had never been his shape. What he did was smaller, more consistent, and somehow more difficult to dismiss than dramatic gestures would have been. He appeared at the healing garden every morning, without fail. Not asking for treatment, not requesting access. Just there, standing at the edge, sometimes asking a careful question, sometimes silent, sometimes simply present in the way he used to not be. He had sourced keeper texts she hadn't been able to locate and set them on her work table with no ceremony. He had cleared a blocked irrigation channel in the healing garden without being asked, which she had noticed only after it was done, and which required either someone telling him about it or him paying enough attention to observe it himself. She could not determine which. Either answer was difficult in its own way. One afternoon, she found him reading, alone, in the library, the same room they had shared in those later evenings before the summit. He did not look up when she came in. She did not announce herself. She settled at the far table with her own work, and they were quiet together for 2 hours, which was comfortable in a way that required not examining too closely. When she left, he said her name once. Not her title, just her name, in a low voice, the way he had said it in front of the summit hall. She paused in the doorway. "I know that words do not repair things," he said, "but I know that I do not get to say, 'I was wrong,' and expect it to mean more than what it is. But I want you to understand, I see you now. I see what you are. I see what I was given and what I did not recognize. And I am telling you plainly, without any strategy behind it, that I see you." She stood in the doorway for a long moment. "I know you do, Hoverix." He waited. "That is the beginning of something," she said. "It is not yet enough to be the end of something else." She left the doorway. She went to the healing garden. That night, she walked alone to the ley line's anchor point. It was accessible through a stairway beneath the keep's oldest foundation level, the kind of place that architecture forgets about over centuries, that exists in old blueprints and the institutional memory of certain elders and nowhere else. And the keepers had given her the access notation in their first correspondence. She had been carrying it since then. She descended the stair, and she sat on the ancient stone at the line's center, and she put her hands on the earth. The ley line was faint. Not gone, far from gone, but thin, the way it had felt when she first arrived and placed her hands on the northern land during that survey walk, waiting, pulling at her gently, like a tide. She sat with it for a long time. She thought about the corridor, the clay vessel, set down against the cold stone wall, the drop of her own essence she had stirred into the salve, freely given, because she had believed she was loved. She thought about her father's voice, "Come back to me," and what he had meant by it. Not come home. He had known she might not. He had meant, wherever you are, come back to yourself. She thought about the moonflower on the windowsill. She thought about 30 days of a man who had never tried before, trying, badly, imperfectly, without his customary skill, because skill requires confidence, and he had lost the confidence to be managed about it. She was not ready to call it love. She did not know that she would ever be, not in the form that she had believed in for the 30 days before the corridor. But she thought about the land beneath her hands, the wolves whose health depended on it, the warriors, young Clivor Stormshard with his two proud eyes and his trembling hands, who had nothing to do with their king's choices and everything to do with this land's continued breath. She thought about what she was, not a dowry, not a resource, not a mechanism someone had engaged or a gift someone had assumed. A healer, the last of an unbroken line of women who had always, in the end, known that the land needed what it needed, and that the choice to give it was theirs to make. She made it. Not for him. She made it because she was Cythara Silverfangs, daughter of Eoven, healer of the Lunar-bound line, and the land was asking her, and she was the only one who could answer. Her hands pressed deeper into the stone. The ley line responded. It did not roar back into full health. That would take time, more sessions, careful sustained work. But it answered her. The thread of connection caught and held, the way a root catches soil and doesn't let go. She felt it anchor, the bond she hadn't placed in 60 days, placed now, freely, entirely on her own terms. She could feel the distant warmth of it, moving outward beneath the keep, running toward the borders, running toward the places where the sickness had been creeping at the edges. She exhaled. When she emerged from the foundation stair and walked back through the keep's main corridor, it was late. The halls were quiet. Most of the pack had gone to their chambers. Haverix was in the Moonflower Garden. She saw him from the corridor entrance before he saw her, sitting on the low stone wall at the garden's edge, not performing anything, not holding anything, just sitting in the dark with his shoulders not quite straight, looking at the pale flowers that bloomed even at this hour, toward whatever fraction of moon was available. He looked like a man who had sat down because he did not entirely know where else to go. She walked into the garden. He looked up when he heard her steps. He did not move to rise, which surprised her. He just looked at her the way he had looked at her in the summit corridor, unguarded, undefended, a king entirely without his kingdom's armor. She sat beside him on the stone wall. Not close, not touching. Just beside, in the particular distance of two people who are figuring out whether the space between them is a gap to be crossed or a border to be respected. He did not speak immediately. She did not require him to. The garden was quiet around them. The moonflowers opened toward the sky. Somewhere beneath the keep's foundations, the ley line was moving again, the faint hum of it running outward through the earth, finding its reach after 2 months of waiting. "The land is breathing again," he said, finally, quietly. Not asking how he knew, or he could feel it the way any alpha can feel the health of his territory, through the bond of place that all alphas carry, the deep territorial instinct that runs beneath conscious thought. "Yes," she said. A long silence. Not uncomfortable, the particular silence of a garden at night, when the only sound is growing things. "Why?" he said. Just that one word. The real question behind it was longer, and he knew she understood it. "Because it was the right time," she said, "and because the land did not do anything wrong." He received that without argument. It was one of the few things she had come to quietly appreciate about him. He did not argue with truths he recognized. He was quiet for another moment. "And us." She considered it. She looked at the moonflowers. She thought about the 17 replays and the corridor, and the clay vessel she had refilled that morning for the first time in 2 months. Not with salve for him, with a new blend she was developing for the Border Patrol wolves who trained in the cold. For her own work, for herself. "I don't know yet," she said. And it was the truest thing she had said to him in months, because it was not closed, and it was not open, and it was not performing anything in either direction. It was simply, honestly, where she was. "That is more than I deserve," he said quietly. She did not tell him he was wrong. She did not tell him he was right. They sat together in the moonflower garden as the night moved around them, not touching, not resolving, not yet anywhere near the end of what had been broken or the beginning of what might be built. Just two wolves on a stone wall in the dark, and one of them finally beginning to understand what she was worth, and the other finally beginning to understand what that had always meant. The ley line hummed beneath the earth, the land was breathing, the moonflowers were open, and Sithara Silverfangs, who had entered this kingdom with everything given freely and had nearly lost herself in the giving, held her hands in her own lap and felt the warmth of the anchor she had placed in the earth below, and understood, with perfect clarity, that whatever came next would come on her terms. Not because she had won, because she had finally, fully, and without apology, learned her own worth. And that, in the end, is not a story about a king. It is a story about a woman who discovered that the most powerful thing she carried was not her bloodline, not her gifts, was not the ley line or the 60 warriors or the 3 river territories. It was the decision about when to give them, and she would never again make that decision for anyone except herself. The tragedy of the Alpha King of the Northern Dominion was not that he nearly lost his kingdom. It was that he nearly lost the woman who would have gladly given him the whole world, and only understood her value the moment she chose to keep it for herself.